Well, welcome everybody. And everybody's sitting in the back of the room tonight. That's great. So if we end up with chairs unoccupied, we'll pull them out so it keeps the integrity of the space. So I just want to welcome everyone on Crowdcast, because last night I think we had about 30 people. And I don't know how many we have tonight, but this is the beauty of why we do Crowdcast, so that we can so Satri can reach out to people who can't be here. So you guys were live. Okay, we're live. Just let you know. Anyway, so I just want to welcome all of you, and we're going to go into silence until Satri comes into the room. Okay, so thank you. It's good to see some of you back. Did you hear? Did you just say something about that we can't start? We already started.
I'm wrong.
I know you're wrong.
You tell me often.
We're still live.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah, there's Brahmananda, panning the room, Anita.
He's feeling sick.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, it's good to see you.
Hey. Welcome. 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 Welcome.
Got everybody?
Namaste.
Namaste. Okay. I would like to remind those who are on the Crowdcast that you can ask a question of Satri. There's what Brahmananda is called Ask a Question button. Okay, perfect. And at some point, Brahmananda will check and give Satri your question.
What happened to those three people? Oh, they're all over there.
Do we need to move those chairs?
Well, you don't need to move your chairs. There's chairs right there.
No, that's.
Actually, this is the seat that's going to get the sun.
Aren't you lucky?
She's
Here
holding the
comes the
sacrifice.
I'm holding the sun.
So I feel the first place to start is, is this the first time you've met me physically? All right. And of those of you, do you know anything about me, or is this like a blind date that you got sucked into?
Your friend bet you.
Yeah.
Dared you. That's right.
Okay, welcome. Come. There is one more chair right here. Yeah. All right, well, that's all right. So welcome. We're just starting introductions. You haven't missed much. So I was just asking who knows anything about me. So I would just give a brief little summary. I had an extraordinary, unexpected, unplanned for, unsought after awakening in January 4th, 1998. I'm an architect. I was an architect at that point anyway for 25 years, or worked in architecture 25 years. And Satchmayi was a founder and developer of a microloan enterprise organization in the state of Nevada where we live, and had been working in nonprofits for much of her life. At that time, I was also part owner of a small solar energy business in the state of Nevada. I was also a volunteer activist for net metering in that state and helped pass that with the Union of Concerned Scientists. I was an architect, and I was involved in many aspects of my community. That was my life. That was our life with our daughter and our house and my son and his children. There wasn't anything in me at that stage of my life that was pulled to matters of spirit. I had been there, done that when I was a young man. I didn't give it undue importance at that stage of my life. I was very, very busy, working often 16 hours a day. I had no idea that what happened to me that night could have happened. There was no frame of reference in my experience, even though I had been exposed to meditation young and to alternative drugs young. There was no comparison. I was thrust into a condition of consciousness that I had no idea existed, and I've never recovered. When this first started, it was such an extraordinary event that I knew it was too good to be true. Or I believed I knew it was too good to be true. And when it quieted down and I went to work the next day, I was just in a great mood. And things that were a burden before were not a burden. I just went through my week just like a great week. And I thought it was one of those Maslow peak experiences. You know, once in a while you get the glimpse. It isn't really going to make a big difference, except you can tell your friends or put it in your journal. And if you really want to, you can write a book. But I was already too busy. I wasn't interested in any of those things. But son of a bitch, the next weekend it came in again. Driving home from watching a movie with my daughter and Satsang, and this like 400 pounds of bliss came into my body. And I'm driving the car home from the movie, and the steering wheel is feeling so good. And my eyelashes, when they blink, are bringing me just bliss throughout my whole body. And I'm sort of losing context for what I'm doing at the moment. So Satsang said, stop driving. And she got me home safe. And I spent 6 hours with this downloading of this extraordinary, unspeakable bliss, as if the universe had fallen in love with me. It was making love to me for 6 hours. And after 6 hours, I would say, okay, this is great, but enough. It was too much. And I went back to work the next work day and thought, oh, well, 2 peak experiences. How interesting. And then the next weekend it came again. And I began to notice in the following weekend, and then any day where I was not busy with the work, it came in and it came in until we both said, this isn't going to stop. I need to figure out what this is. And we went to our Buddhist friends and we tried to have an understanding. Eventually I was able to meet a person who was a devotee who lived nearby on a little ashram that ended up to be the teacher that guided me through this process. And I got some information about him. And when I first saw a recording of him talking about the Bhagavad Gita, in fact, is when I recognized absolutely to every part of my being that there was a path, there was a purpose that this had happened, and there was a track before me that I could follow, that I could align with. And my whole life became purposeful from that point on. 9 months later, I went to India and I lived there for 6 years, coming back to the United States periodically, dismantled my entire life, handed over everything to Satsang. She took over the management of everything in the material world, and I left it all behind. There was no doubt, because I had this extraordinary thing that wasn't stopping. It was actually revealing to me in a continuous way the nature of a potential or a possibility all of us humans carry. It may have been for me the end of my many lives, the end of the journeying of this particular soul, but we are all at different stages in this process. That was absolutely clear to me. It was not unique to me. Even though I had not been in the spiritual conversation for 25, 30 years, I didn't have any context for the conversation. That is, most of you probably have had, except for some exposure when I was young. It wasn't until this immersion with my Indian teacher in India, where he began to reveal to me his recognition of the Bhagavad Gita as a map of the journey of consciousness, a map of the journey of the soul as it returns to its origin. And that's what I immersed myself in, and he immersed me into the entire Indian tradition. And because my system was open, everything worked. Everything was powerful. Everything I could experience directly. It wasn't anything mental. Everything that happened to me was experiential. I would just wait for the next thing to come. And all I could do was learn how to ride it, to try to recognize what it was pointing to. Or sometimes it was absolutely revelatory, unfolding the very design of why we're here and the whole structure and condition of our embodiment and why it's like this. And after 6 years, I came back to the United States. I ran a center in Sacramento, California for 4 years as spiritual teacher for my teacher, still working for him. At the end of that period, my own journey completed, where there was no difference. There was nothing else for me to do as a disciple or a devotee. I was quite bewildered because I had been such a devotee in that time. There was so much surrender and willingness and love and recognition of the divinity of my teacher that there was no question I was going to live with him for the rest of my life. And it ended up that just disappeared one night and something else came. And then I became my own teacher and have been doing this since about 2010. Satsang began to come on board in about
Why don't I tell the story?
Yes, okay,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We're practicing, so a lot of times we just make up what happens in front of the room, depending. And seriously, Rod has been with us long enough to know that. So I'm the other side of the coin. Satri is our experiential bliss. I want to say bunny. It's probably not appropriate, but anyway, he got the amazing, crazy, blissful awakening. And I'm an awareness being, and it has come in slowly, over probably starting about the same time. Yeah. So what was lucky for me is when we met our teacher, that he just said, if you make it, talking to me, if you make it, you and Satri will manifest this. I didn't know it was going to take 20 years, but it did. So it really says a lot for being patient and having a lot of perseverance. So why am I in the front of the room? And it is because what has now come to me and is still coming to me, because this is a never-ending process. You don't have one moment of this, clarity and awakening and it's all done. That's just like the beginning. I finally am at the point where I can hold my own presence, that I have come to recognize what is working through me, or what I am. There's still more work to be done. I do not compare myself to Satri. I fulfill a different mission up here. But, yeah. I think let's see, I was trying to think of any. Oh, I know. So sometimes people see me go out. And I think a lot of you who've known me a while have seen me do that. And I did it last night. I also hold the energy in the room for Satri. So if it gets very intense, it doesn't go to him. It goes to me, and I'll just go out. So if you see me doing that, I'm not sleeping. I'm in the most intense bliss you could get. It's like such a special thing. So anyway, thank you.
She's my grounding cord.
Yes.
She's the energy sink, so that I can continue to talk and function.
Yeah.
So, and I have people in the room who are linked with me who are also helping hold the space. That's also what's going on. That helps create a vessel, a container for the opportunity that we have together tonight. I'm very clear on this. I'm very clear that there was a purpose living you that got you into the room. You're in the front. Yes.
We're all like,
in the very front. You can't hide out.
this, even though we are, we've had a lot of conversations lately about our informality and our authenticity and where all that comes from. It's like being authentic does not necessarily mean you're informal. So we are more, I think, just relaxed because we're very comfortable with ourselves and how we are in the room and with people. So there's a lot of laughter that goes on sometimes, and it's perfectly fine. And we still have a sacred space.
Yes. It's not a comedy show, but it can have some approximation. It is more like a reality show.
There you go, a spiritual.
And there's a certain humor in that component of truth when it pops up.
That is true. I've learned if you do not have humor, this is a very difficult process.
Yeah.
So, and the humor is turned at myself, not at others. Okay.
So I wanted to just stay with that a little bit because the nature of my teachings is that there's this recognition that spirit and matter are equal and intertwined, and each has an important role for the other. But because of the nature of the obscurity that we arise out from as being born in human bodies and conditioned by our piece of the collective consciousness that we take on, the error of the collective consciousness, that we have to strengthen spirit for a while. We have to strengthen that quality of spirit, and then we can bring it into matter, into our human nature, and set in motion a process by which spirit can be held in our body, in our personhood. This process of the integration between spirit and matter is transformation. And almost all of my work is about how can you integrate this so it's something you can live and have access to in your everyday. This is the focus and orientation. It's not just about liberation. It's about manifestation. The ability to immerse yourself into that which is the truth of what you are as spirit, but then to take it into that which you are as matter is what matters. Matter matters when it becomes a vehicle for consciousness to manifest itself. So just to bring that in. And the nature of this is that Satsang are a demonstration of that. We have actually consciously working on me bringing these extraordinary heights of consciousness that are readily available to me into my lived life and in my relationship, in with my wife, with my daughter, with all of you, with the nuts and bolts of living in life and all the pieces of what it means to exist. And what I've understood, I can recognize clearly now, which I didn't recognize before, is that mukti alone isn't the purpose of life. It's mukti in enjoyment is the purpose of life. To be able to enjoy life without fear, without need, without attachment, without demand. That is enjoyment. And that ability to be in life in that quality of immediacy and to meet each of the things that come up in life is where the reality of spirit becomes available to you as a person. That it becomes not a separation between you as a person and you as a spiritual being, but something that coexists continuously. Okay, now there is a lot of work involved in this. There is the work of you coming to some relationship with what we call liberation. That's, of course, the first labor. And many of you are here because you're already on that journey to varying extents. And then there is the actual dirty work of bringing it back down into your life and learning how to discover in your moment to moment what is left in you that's still not able to align with what you know as spirit. So all my teachings, all my programs are to bring both these into motion. For example, we have a Sat weekend coming up. Let's see, this weekend coming? Mm-hmm. In Connecticut. And the purpose of the Sat weekend is primarily to strengthen the mukti quality, the liberation quality, to strengthen the spirit in you. So we sit together in silence most of the time. There are some instructions and guidance about what may unfold during the retreat. But one of the things that's clear in our experience is that a program like this often sets in motion the next stage of your journey before you even get in the room. And if it doesn't, it happens in the room. And if even that doesn't, it happens afterwards. And sometimes it happens in all three or any two. So the recognition is that it puts you on a track that, if it's supported, can be a sustainable unfolding of the spiritual potential that you carry, and also an enhancing of your ability to manifest it in your life. The other part of my programs, like the 6 days and the 9 days, we're going to have a 9-day in November, is it? Where we will bring it in to your life energetically, and in terms of the work you do during those 9 days, the information that comes to you, and the unfolding of your own process that occurs in those 9 days. So there is a very strategic recognition. I have a very strategic design of the arc of what's possible. And I notice that if people can keep following the arc of those programs and keep in touch with me through our free broadcasts or the remote programs that we have available, that they can continue to make progress even if they're not with me all the time, or only able to be with me a few times a year or for a few times in the year. So this is what you're getting an introduction to. You're getting an introduction to Satsang and where we're headed, and what is the nature of the structure that I bring. And of course, what has you do this is the call within your own soul. There is a natural affinities that occur between a student and a teacher. So for some of you, clearly, I will be your teacher, or I am your teacher. For others, you don't know yet, and for some, I'm not. But no matter what happens in this room, or if I ever meet you again, I assure you this is a push on whatever path you're on, with whatever teacher you're in, with whatever tradition you're empowering. This is a push, as it is when you meet any other teacher who carries something of the same wisdom within them. Okay, so we have 4 satsangs in this East Coast visit. We did one last night. It was called What is the Who, or Who Am I? And it's addressing 4 questions, the 4 primal questions that I feel that we as intellectually aware, self-aware beings can use to engage ourselves in the process of a self-evident truth that is already here. That we're looking to uncover a self-evident truth. My awakening that occurred was to experience the self-evident truth. It was a glimpse of what universal consciousness means. It was a taste of it. It didn't just I didn't make that happen. It's already here. That we live in a field of this extraordinary quality of being and knowing and experiencing without paying attention to it. Because we've made everything else more important. We have made our little piece of the content of being a human being and being in life more important. We have not been given examples of how to quit paying attention to ourselves and our issues and what's important to us. So we're not paying attention to what is in plain sight, yet hidden to us. So much of the spiritual path is about emptying out the content of the perceiver, of the experiencer, so that it can begin to see the most obvious thing that everyone else is not seeing. Just like Newton, when he discovered gravity, what kind of state? He was sitting under a tree. He was probably a fairly developed awareness being sitting under a tree, and an apple fell. And there was something in him that said, oh, what was that? Oh, how did that happen? How come it goes down? And Newton had seen the universe. He could see that there was no up or down once you get outside of the earth, no right or left, no behind or forward. How is it that this apple knows to go down? What is doing it? Is the apple doing it? And he began to make an inquiry into the nature of a self-evident truth that had not yet been discovered. So this is what we're doing. We're looking to discover a self-evident truth that requires us to see through the assumptions and the unexamined perceptions that we are living from or through in order to discover the nature of reality, to discover the nature of not only who we are, but what we are and what is the purpose of this whole thing. Because when we open to that inquiry using our Western educated programmed intelligence, you take the intelligence is what's left over when you get rid of all the information. When you get rid of all the content, you have intelligence. That is that which knows without thinking, that which knows without remembering, that which knows without reference to notes. It is that which knows. So that's intelligence. To train ourselves, take that intelligence without its content and begin to engage in this inquiry by taking that spaciousness, like Newton sitting under the tree, notice what arises or falls, and be present with what that reveals. To let the underlying principles, what were the underlying principles? It's the same as the ones that are here in this room. First one is, you exist. I said it last night, I'll say it again. Anyone who's not here, raise your hand. Now, some of you aren't here, but you can't raise your hand. So, there are some self-evident truth. Your own existence is a self-evident truth that we take for granted. I exist. That possibility to say you know you exist. I had this recognition when I was 7 years old. San Francisco Bay, I'm on a ship with my parents who are sending off some friends who are going to New Zealand. And first time I've come out of where we lived in the city, and I'm on the boat overlooking the bay. And what came to me is, I'm here. I'm here. I exist. That was a distinct, unforgettable moment. It was just as plain as that. It was the most plain thing ever. Of course I was there. How could I be anyplace else? I was right there. But the nature of the recognition that I exist came to me at that moment at 7 years old. And we all have that moment. If you look into your childhood, you'll find the moment when you recognize, oh, I have parents. I'm a person. They're people. The identity takes root and we know we are a person. That's a self-evident truth that we forget through the rest of the course of the day of our lives. Yet that is essential. The principle that would allow for self-awareness. Where in the hell did that come from? And what does that mean? What is the principle behind it, like gravity is behind the falling apple? What are the premises that I am not aware of that are having it be that I exist? I breathe, I feel, I taste, I smell, I have the senses, I sleep at night. How come? How come? Why? What for? These are the 4 questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of this, of life? And how do I live? Each has a precursor or interrelated piece of the other. In terms of coming into relationship, what it means to be you. I want to be clear about that. It's my experience that the only thing in existence that can know God or the Supreme Being or the purpose of existence or be able to collaborate with that consciously is each of us. The individual bound human being is the one that can mobilize that inherent piece of consciousness that came from an ocean that became self-aware as us. Self-awareness is the fruit of the 4.5 billion year process of evolution. The self-aware human beings we are now are 10,000 times more aware than was possible 300, 400 years ago. Our ability to penetrate into the underlying assumptions of our existence are greater because we're no longer in survival, because our intelligence has been developed, because we have material prosperity and health, and we have organized civilization. We have structures that allow for us to have relative safety, relative security, so that we can create a stable base of our identity. Even though most of us are neurotic in our own little way, it's not the same as being eaten by lions or threatened by your neighborhood tribe. So the degree of stress that would otherwise grab us into this existence is less. So we have more freedom to explore, freedom to question, freedom to inquire. How is it it's like this for me? How is it I'm having this experience? And what can I do about it? And what is the purpose behind it? So these 4 satsangs, we're in the second one, is really to kind of each one being a point to kick you into a next place of possibility, a next place of knowing and experiencing from where you were before. So the question tonight is, why are you here? Why in the hell am I here? How did it happen that I got here? There must have been a mistake. Wrong parents, wrong planet, wrong age. For some of you, is the cute recognition. And others of you don't know you had a choice. You don't know there isn't a question. But we can start from what brought you here into this room. We can start with what made you curious. What had you show up here? What are the decisions that you've made in your life that, as at this moment, has accumulated in our time together here? What is the underlying causality that is actually motivating us? So this is the inquiry. Why am I here? Could also be, what is the purpose for me being here? Or it could be, what are the forces or the principles that have me become interested in something? Is it just desire? Is it because other people are doing it? Is it curiosity? Those are some of the superficial motivations. Or is it a call from within you that almost can't do anything else but this? The depth of your ability to recognize why you are here is proportional to your ability to access that push or call that you are experiencing that doesn't allow you to do other things. Discovering that within yourself, being able to feel that, or able to understand at least that, gives you a place to put your attention that will help unravel the error of what you have made otherwise important, which is usually to feel good, not to feel bad, to be happy, to be comfortable. So the more we are in touch with why we are here, the more motivated we become to discover that principle that that's pointing to. So I want to talk a bit about the structure that I've discovered in my own journey. And that in the revelation of this structure, it gives some context for what we're talking about tonight. Because at the very moment that my awakening happened, I had been in a place of almost total darkness and despair. Rose up that same night, overtook my consciousness. I met what I call evil within myself. And I had a recall of a life where I was a personification of that evil. And that had become so convincing and so powerful. I lost consciousness and went unconscious on my drafting board. When I came out of that, as if I had gone from one extreme to the other, from the absolute darkness and obscurity and of my selfishness and my evil, to this brilliant, unspeakable freedom, love, light, interconnectedness. In that moment, I knew I had won the lottery of all lotteries. I knew, I didn't even know I was betting, but I had won it. And I knew it that it wasn't unique to me. I knew that this had happened as an expression of a purposeful unfolding of a possibility that I was carrying that I didn't even know I had. And that revelation, that seeing was absolutely true. Every piece of me knew it was true. This wasn't about me personally. It also let me know in that moment that I didn't know it yet, that there was a purpose. That in fact, all of life, that this could have occurred for me is a reflection of that purpose. The purpose to wake up. The purpose to wake up to what I truly am or to what we truly are. To be able to access that quality, what it is actually the purpose that is why we're here. If we know it or not. Not until that moment, 1998, 20 years ago, I didn't know. I didn't know that was the purpose. But in that moment, I knew that my whole life was purposeful. I knew that everything I did or didn't do, every choice, every action, was a reflection of an alignment that I probably unwittingly was making. That brought me to that moment it was just my 50th year, halfway through this life. And behind that, I knew there was this God, this extraordinary intelligence, this unspeakable structures of consciousness and beings and forces and principles that were holding all of us human beings, holding this entire planet purposely. To think we're alone is a vast error, unspeakable to all beings who are not in our condition of consciousness. Look at them. They think they're separate. Look at them. Look how miserable they can be. Oh my God. They're not paying attention at all. It was this recognition that there is a principle of being we're not accessing, because the nature of being able to access it is we have to become individualized. We have to become miserable, self-involved, selfish, ignorant, stupid, addicted, complaining, bitching, moaning, dissatisfied, grasping, resenting, all the rest of it, kind of creature, in order to appreciate the extraordinary self-evident truth when it reveals itself. We have to be so miserable that we can see it, that we can experience it, that it can be real. And how do we get miserable? By being separate from this purpose, by being separate from that intelligence, by being separate from that life principle. And this prepares us. It creates the vehicle, the vessel that can hold the ocean of the truth of what we are individually. So it can individualize. So God can discover that it's alive as you. So you can discover that you are God. And it's no big deal. It's what we all are, except we can't see it or trust it or know it because of the coding of our individualization process. So a low self-esteem, shame, these can't exist in truth. They can only exist in error. Betrayal, deception, lying, they can only come from human beings. They're an extraordinary creation in the existence where it's all interconnected and there is no lies. There's only truth. Only human beings can create this. The whole universe and beings who are not human or haven't chosen to be human or have not come to being human are just in wonder how effective we are in creating suffering and how we have forgotten our original nature. Here we have self-awareness, the greatest gift of all. And we're still thinking we're this embodied, miserable person with this story and history, with this limiter on what's possible and what's not possible for yourself and the world. So this is an example of self-evident truths. Yes, I understand. You may have to think you have to trust what I'm saying, but all you have to do is find out for yourself that there is a nature of an underlying reality that governs all of existence, of which we're emerging purposefully in order to come out of it, to come to discover that we're actually responsible for the whole damn thing. So this has many, 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 many repercussions in terms of what it means to be you and how to live and what difference you can make when you do discover this about yourself. No matter what you say, I'm too old, I'm too stupid, I'm too unenlightened, I'm too miserable. Those things don't matter. They don't. What you think about yourself doesn't matter. One part of you knows it, but it's not that you don't matter in the way the ego takes it. It's that the issues you make about your life are not truth. And that by being, we are consciously being, we are demonstrating the purpose of existence at one level. So behind all this existence, there is an unspeakable intelligence that is aware of each of us individually. That's what came to me. Maybe for some of you, you've had this realization. It's as if the universe met you, is meeting you personally. The sense of that loving you or knowing you or recognizing you individually is another expression of the truth of things, because that which is paying attention to you is trying endlessly to become you if you would let it. It's knocking on the doors. It's showing you circumstances and issues in your life for you to meet so that it can reveal itself. And yet what we do is run the other direction. It's constantly showing us and giving us those times, those difficult periods, those curses, which are in fact blessings, that would be the doorway to moving into a deeper relationship with that divine reality that we are. So it's hammering on the doors continuously. God has a hand in every piece of our life, including us, because there's no one else. There's nothing else but that. So this is what I can share from my experience. I share from my recognition. It's not about believing it or not. I suggest that you discover this for yourself. And if you're doing anything on the spiritual path, that would be what you would seek. What is it in me that's preventing me from knowing that I am the divine reality itself? What separates me from that? Because all it wants is to love you. All it wants is to be you. I had someone in the room the other night who was complaining about the moths around her house. They were all over her. She couldn't get rid of them. She kept trying to capture them and separate her from herself, but everywhere the moths were coming and they would land on her skin and she'd be in this tremendous repulsion. Go away, leave me alone, go away, leave me alone. And I suggested to her, that's because you're their mother. That's because they're coming to you because you're the fire that they seek to become. Because they sense in you that possibility within themselves. And that they're your children. The recognition of the fact that the universe is trying to show us what we are in our divine nature is actually a fundamental truth. But we're not seeing it. We're not seeing it in part because nobody else is seeing it, because everyone else is so self-involved they can't imagine themselves being divine. Even when you know yourself as divine, even when you can love everyone and you can meet them at any level they want to be met with, you can't change a person who's unwilling to meet you back. Because we are the supreme being. We're the ones in charge. So if we want to be miserable, nobody else can change your mind. You choose to be miserable, that's your choice. And you are the divine. And you're just as powerful as the person who would be the divine consciously. So we're unwittingly using our power to keep ourselves small. And these are self-evident truths that don't become clear until you break out of the habit of the shell of our ego, of our doingness, of our identity. Until then, all you have is the words or whatever longing or aspiration or even despair that you carry. Because that is evidence of the truth, of the separate cost of the separation. And that is a doorway in itself. Despair is a doorway. Loss is a doorway. Grief is a doorway. They're all doorways to being able to convert the error of our human system into a vehicle for divine consciousness, divine love, divine truth, divine ananda, bliss, joy, and light. So where it comes down to in this second question is, why am I here? You're here to discover that. You're here to discover that is the job to every embodied being. It's not to be a good daughter or a good son or to be a mom and raise children. These are all incidentals. Why am I here is really that there is something larger than ourselves that we can know. And that what we need to do is trust that is there and learn to move into alignment with it. And how do you discover why you're here? Is by looking to answer that question. Because in looking to answer that question, you'll begin to see times of your life that being here was right. That this person, this situation, this relationship, this problem is exactly what I need or needed. You may not know it at the time, but you can look back and see this horrific husband, this horrific partner, this terrible job, this accident, this illness, this limitation was exactly what I needed to see what I can now see that I wasn't able to see before. So what does that open? That opens a willingness to come into life in a way that's aligned with the purpose of life. So what is the experience when that happens? That moment of recognition, what is the experience of being able to recognize, oh, this was the right thing. This was exactly as it should have been. What happens is this sense of relief, this sense of expansion, the sense of connection, as if you became more than you were just before. It's as if you came into existence more fully, in that moment. That's the answer to the question of why I'm here. Now, there are many interim answers. For example, the word dharma is a Sanskrit word that indicates the actions that are consistent with our innate nature for the unfolding of the opportunity of being in existence. And if you're a student, well, it's to be a good student. If you're an athlete, it's to be a good athlete. And to be as good athlete as you can, but of course we're always judging that. Or whatever may be the thing that arises in our life that we're giving intention to or importance to. And then the experience of being able to take those actions, be it to be a mother, to be a father, to be independently capable of functioning in the world, to be able to handle your finances, to be able to come out of the trauma of your childhood and be able to create a sense of self and a sense of identity and being able to function into the world at a level you weren't able to before, to be able to discover that you have some say over your life. They have the ability to control the parts of your life that aren't aligned and an ability to strengthen the parts of your life that are aligned. That's the process of maturation that all us human beings go through that allows us to create an individual sense of identity that's capable of holding, ultimately, this final truth. And we all go through this in the stages of life. If you've had children, you can see how the vessel of their individuality expands, how it learns how to relate to existence more consistent with what's going on, where they can, to varying degrees, their ability to come into existence as individuals to get what they want, to avoid what they don't want, to control their world, to be able to discover and learn. All these others are evidence of this dharmic principle that comes in the unfolding of the opportunity or the potentiality that each of us carry. Now, what is the word dharma also means action. It comes down to not just knowing, but living. Not just thinking about, but acting on. So one of the natures of dharma is we can know we should be doing something a certain way, but if we don't act on it, then we aren't. And that discrepancy between knowing it and not acting on it is what creates unnecessary suffering. Not doing the thing you know you should do. Not sticking with something because you decide you can't stick with it anymore or you don't want it anymore. And of course, why don't we follow our dharma? There's multiple reasons, one of which is the collective ignorance that each of us carry. How successfully you do that? I can share my own experience. I ran away from home when I was 15, 3 months. I lived on my own. Actually, it was more than that. I figured out I was about 6 months, 5 months. And I rode a bicycle, nothing, no money, just clothes on my back, sold my bicycle, hung out in a little college town in Southern California, scrambled and scraped together a living. People kept giving me places to stay. I somehow got food, but mostly I lived off of Taco Bell and coffee and donuts. That was my high quality diet. And what I loved to do was draw. I was drawing continuously. I started discovering art when I was around 9, and I loved drawing. And by the time I was 14, I had just learned how to draw 3D. And I loved what I could create drawing 3D. And I spent all day drawing. And it was just like, there was no fear, there was no anxiety. It was just perfect. As long as I could draw, all the turbulence of my adolescence was able to be quiet. And I felt fulfilled. And after that, I actually did go on and get a degree in art. But at that time, I would hang out into this mystical bookstore. Now I was raised a Catholic, so I wasn't exposed to all these different traditions, but I began to read everything about astral travel and psychic readings and, palmistry and astrology charts. And somehow during that period, I found that I loved doing astrology charts. Back then, it was all hand calculations. I was a dyslexic child. Doing that mathematics, I didn't even know I had the capacity to do that kind of mathematics. And of course, I kept making lots of mistakes, but I ended up doing astrology charts. People would come and say, do my chart. And I started making a living doing astrology charts for people. I'm 16 years old, hanging out on the beach in an abandoned car that's covered in sand on some days. Otherwise, one of the postgraduate students had an office on campus that he would let me stay in when I couldn't find another place to stay. So I loved it. I loved the freedom. I loved the simplicity. And I loved the ability to be able to have a sense. What astrology brought was that there were these forces that were shaping ourselves, that came from the moment of birth, and that it gave me a context for understanding my moods, where I could track the planets and I could say, well, damn, that's exactly what was going on. And I began to see that there were these underlying principles, even back then, before this awakening came. And I loved it. I loved that shit. Until one day I discovered that a person who I had given an astrology reading to had been done for the wrong year. She had loved the reading. She thought it was right on, but the astrology was absolutely different. And I stopped doing astrology charts because I knew I didn't know how this shit worked. I was 22 at that time. Each of these I discovered a track. I broke out of the conditioning, unlike many people. I didn't have the same degree of security and programming that other people my age had, although I was born in that generation, right? We were a pretty wild generation. I was a wild generation before it got really wild. But each seemed right. What did I do? I went and studied art in college. I went to California College of Arts and Crafts and was good at it. Went to school, got some awards. And that's when right around that time, I discovered a link to a teacher called Meher Baba. And that period was where I was first oriented to this whole spiritual path as something, not just like an abstraction, how to astral travel, how to read astrology charts, but it's something that could actually be lived. Each of these had a truth at the time that motivated me to keep taking actions aligned with that truth at the time. If you look back into your life, you will find similar actions. Certainly, I took wrong actions. I got into drugs. I became an addict. I pretty much destroyed my health. So I discovered what it is to be a dharmic in that process. But I did come out of that and was able to build a productive sense of identity that was eventually able to become an architect. Architecture, I loved. I didn't ever imagine I would ever stop doing architecture. I just loved the work. I couldn't believe people would pay me for it. And my treasure was to have more projects. That's what I wanted. I just wanted to do architecture. I just wanted more and more architecture. That's what I loved to do. So what was there was the ability to act on the prompting to greater and greater effectiveness in aligning with what are the actions that needed to be taken, what are the actions not to take. So Dharma is action. When you come to the spiritual path, your ability to align with your Dharma or not shows itself. This is in your arena. The arenas where you gave up, where you didn't follow through, where you found excuses, or you became the victim of a story or victim of other people, and you lost your own authority, and you didn't know how to recover it without certain kind of props. And if you didn't have those props, you collapsed and you couldn't stay with what was the opportunity as arising. These are all evidence of learning how to align with Dharma, but not yet successful. So when you come to a spiritual path, all those inadequacies and all those incompletions and all those times when you were able to have to come up so that you can let go of them, forgive yourself, move beyond those patterns of behavior, impulsiveness or reactivity, or the decisions or the judgments that you have about yourself or the world that are a reflection of that. So one of the parts of aligning with the spiritual path is to recognize these underlying structures that are hidden, but when you discover them, they're self-evident. The underlying programming that unwittingly you've been carrying without realizing you're carrying, that is separating you from being able to align yourself with the unfolding of the ultimate purpose, which is the Satya Dharma that I am presenting you tonight. There is a track. The spiritual path has stages. In the Bhagavad Gita, it describes 18 stages of the journey of consciousness. Once it begins its return journey, when it comes out of its human embodiment. And the first stage is when we recognize that we're bound. While the consequence of not being able to live aligned with the truth that's within us becomes so painful that we go into a dejection or a despair. That's the entry point. And from there comes a means by which we find discrimination, where we begin to discern what's the problem, what are the issues, what are the things that are keeping me in dejection. And in the process, there comes this access to a current of aliveness, a current of knowing, a quality of being that wasn't available before. And we become hungry for that. And we start taking actions aligned with that discernment. In the Bhagavad Gita, the second chapter, which where discrimination occurs, is about knowing you are the soul. Knowing that there are questions that you can answer. Discovering that there's a purpose behind it all, and that you can align yourself with that consciously. And then the third chapter is about how to act aligned with that insight, with that discrimination, with that knowingness. And that leads you to a chapter where what it is you're seeking becomes more and more available to you. And as that becomes more and more available to you, the farther you get from that state of dejection and more you become aligned with the truth of the self-evident truth that you are. It begins to unfold and reveal. You begin to discover that you're a different kind of being than you thought you were. Your ego begins to fall away. The things that you clung to keep yourself happy or to compensate for your misery in your life lose their relevance or fall away. You come into existence with less and less baggage. You shed the story of you. You shed the emotional patterns. You release the structures in your body that is keeping you in all these structures. And it's literally like traveling through the upper atmosphere and discarding the structures that got us that far so that we could go further, and discarding some more so we could go further. You've all been traveling this journey. And that first part of the journey, you come to the self. You come to the being. You come to that quality of you that can meditate, the quality of you that can be at peace, the quality of you that can feel and appreciate beingness instead of doingness. Then that's the completion of the individual aspect. After that comes where we open ourselves up to the universal forces that have been knocking on our doors all along, but didn't know that's what they were. And then we learn how to allow the next stage where the universe starts taking over the process of our own unfolding. And our work on that stage, it's for the next third of the book, is how to surrender, how to let go, how to know when truth is showing and when untruth is showing, how to be with those things, and the quality of faith and confidence, sense of okayness, security, and love starts expanding at extraordinary levels. And then there is a final stage where that completes. It completes with the recognition that the one I that I came to, that I am that I am that universal principle that has taken an incarnation in this form. And that stage of recognition brings with it, as all realizations do, a certain authority, and along with that authority, a certain responsibility. Which means responsibility is the ability to respond to the opportunity for truth and love to manifest itself in your life with that person, with this moment, at any one time. And it's not even anything you do. It is what happens. And you begin to discover yourself as an instrument or channel for that divine principle into existence. So there you have it. Within that context, you have this question. Why am I here? This discovery, I've just said it into the room. Energetically, I've just opened a track for you. You're not likely to be able to follow this entirely, but it has been able to give a glimpse, a long view, taking you to a viewpoint that would allow you to see that the life you're living right now and the reason you came in this room are an expression of that same track principle. And there's nothing in your life that isn't. Maybe in this room it'll become clearer because I can speak it. There is, in this room, I can speak the Dharma. I can speak the body of information. I can be clear about aspects of it that I've shared with you. But simultaneously, I'm also bringing to you something of the energy from where I speak from. Something of the transmission, which, if you can receive it, penetrates into and opens a passageway so that you can find it more easily for yourself. Okay, there you have it. There it is. As far I'm going to go tonight. I have two more satsangs, so I'm going to save some for the next satsangs. But that's it for tonight. But what I would like to open it for you is anybody who would have a question or something to share or any of that, you have an opportunity to come forward and have a seat and speak to me. Now, it's going to be, you're only going to be allowed to speak to me for 10 or 15 minutes. You can't give me your whole story. Matter of fact, there's really no real significant reason why you need to come forward other than for yourself. Because to come out of the chair out there and to sit here, you're making a declaration. You're throwing yourself out of yourself. And you're putting yourself into an arena where it will become more real. Whatever is that's unfolding in this space for you. And that's something you can take home with you. And that's the invitation. And you don't have to know what you're going to talk about. I assure you that whatever you think you're going to talk about, but you can take whatever you want to talk about up anyway, and we'll use that as our entry point. Yes, the moth mother. So it's Kristen. Kristen. Welcome, by the way. Yeah, look at me. Okay. You can look at the room too. It's always good to look at the room.
It makes me want to cry looking at all these people. So
They're all,
wonderful.
they're all your children.
It's incredible. Thank you all. I don't know what I'm going to say. I've been thinking about the whole moth thing and the whole story. And all I know is this is a major transformation.
Yes.
And I have to kill them or they will kill me. There's no two ways about it.
Okay.
They're costing me financially, physically, mentally, huge amounts of energy. But I'm looking at them differently. I'm looking at them with love. I knew they were coming to me for a reason, a good reason. It's just one more thing, and one more way the universe is beating on me, which I know. Last night you talked about being addicted to suffering. And it really sunk in for me.
One of our favorite addictions. Ego thrives on suffering. It doesn't thrive on happiness. We may think it thrives on happiness, but actually it thrives on suffering. Happiness is just a temporary interim thing to keep us hooked into suffering. It just comes up and disappears, and you notice what's left over is suffering. That is really because that's what ego is addicted to, suffering.
So I've been writing about this in my memoir. I know this. I know how I set myself up my whole life to be a workaholic in my job, and then my house became my goal. I actually wrote about my house as a metaphor for myself because I believed that I would be, once my house was complete, I would be spiritually complete. And I think that was a huge limiting belief.
What is that movie? About money pit? Yes, it's a attention pit. The money you pay for your possessions is it sucks your attention, and your attention is where you give your energy. That means you empower your house so that it has more authority than you. You become the victim of your project. You become a victim of that which you've attended to. And it's then running you. And I assure you, when you wake up to it, keep giving it attention doesn't solve the problem. There's this, an accidental fire that occurs. And then you don't even have to sort through your stuff and decide what to give away and what not give away. It's the great simplifier. You could pray for fire. We pray for rain. We got to pray for fire.
I've considered that.
Let the universe take over what we can't do for ourselves, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and when I saw the movie, The Warrior, the young man, his teacher's gas station was destroyed completely.
Yeah.
And it was like no big deal. And I remember seeing that and going, wow, what a huge relief.
Exactly. So there's your future. And when you do that, there won't be a moth problem.
I'm like struggling with, am I being pushed out of my house? Am I supposed to sell my house? But what I'm doing is just it's like layers and layers. I've been cleaning out my house for years. Last summer, I didn't think I could clean out any more. And then I just ran out of energy. And then the moths came back. And now I'm cleaning out more. I'm to the point where I don't want to see one object in my face.
Good time to sell a house. It's a good market. Interest rates are
no one's going to buy a house with moths in it.
Don't have to tell them that, Or I just have some extinguishers come in and get rid of them. They're just lessons. Bottom line of it is, or sell it for less. It has moths. I'll take half off.
You won't believe what I just did. I had 9 wool rugs cleaned. Cost me $500. I brought them home. I started putting them out, and I could see all the damage. I didn't think they were damaged this year. I took them out to the street, and I put a sign saying, "Take at your own risk." These were just cleaned, but they were in a moth-infested house. I could not put them out there and let someone else walk away with them and not know that.
Good for
I
you.
could not sell my
That's
house.
quite integritous. So just have the realtor put in there contaminated by moths and just get whatever you can get. And then you don't have the issue. You see, we think we have to have a certain way. Now, of course, you got to be practical. But the bottom line of it is that they're there because something in you is powerful enough to bring in a species of insects that could torture you sufficiently that this is your main conversation with an enlightened master. It's really extraordinary what we can do when we're not seeing the true nature of things. It's probably indicating that you're in a time on your journey where even the house has to go.
It's tough. I love my neighbors. That's a biggie.
Sure, that's it.
Really
Yeah,
tough. I'm
yeah.
attached to my neighbors.
Yes, that's what does
Yeah.
it. It's the attachment structure that prevents us from taking the next step when the next step presents itself. And then the mind comes forward and says, well, what would I do? What would I live? Where would I live?
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
how could it be
I've been
different?
through all this.
It's trying to anticipate what it might mean. But this is why the spiritual path takes courage. Because literally, even any transition in our life, to meet the opportunity of that transition, is we have to, though we may be in fear, we have all our considerations, we take the action anyway. That quality in ourselves that can do that is divine. So I expect that all you really need is willingness to take the action, right? What was the guy that was going to kill his son, sacrifice his son for
Abraham.
Abraham? He didn't actually end up having to kill his son. He just had to be willing to kill himself.
That's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like I can go through this, whatever it is I need to go through,
That's right.
without selling the house.
Okay, now that's because you say it in this context, and that isn't correct. I think you have to be, willingness means, true willingness means, I am willing to sell this house. Not some sort of, some kind of deal can I make with you, the universe?
Right.
So I can hang on to my house and still go to heaven. You know, Jesus could do that, but most of us can't bring our house to heaven. So, the issue here is just the willingness. It is meant, it takes us to whatever is the last thing. This journey will take you to each last thing until you find the next last thing. Because it depends upon the fire of the aspiration. It depends upon the degree of the longing that even presents us the opportunity to let go of those investments that would have us not take the actions. But ultimately, if you're destined to come to the full truth, then every last thing goes. And I tell you, you are so grateful. You're so happy when you do that.
When I put those rugs in the street,
Yeah.
I sat in my living room and I looked at the bare room, the bare floors, and I felt this enormous freedom. Yeah, spaciousness. It's like, and then I started right away investigating not moth eating drugs, and then I said, "What are you doing? Just it's a summer. Just relax and enjoy the space."
So, that is your evidence. That's evidence of a right action. That's evidence of a dharmic action, consistent with the opportunity before you. So, you know, to go beyond ourselves, often we need someone to help us, right? If you're going to climb a part of the Everest you never climbed before, you want a Sherpa or a guide that can put the ropes in so you can climb those heights that you haven't been before. So it's often the time to ask for direction to what does someone else see would be the highest opportunity, but make sure you ask it of someone who's gone beyond you, beyond where you've been. Because that's the nature of the guidance, is we only need it when we're not able to do it, when we're not able to see it, to recognize it as an opportunity. So that's when the guru or the teacher becomes your aid. Not everyone has to have a guru or teacher. Some people have lived dharmically so consistently that they can recognize for themselves and take the actions, but those are rare. Most of us ultimately will come up against our issues in a way that they're too obscuring to let us see or recognize that it was the right action or isn't the right action. So this is why the universe has given realized beings, realized teachers. They come back for this purpose, to assist the rest who are ready to make that transition. It's freedom.
I've known it in my heart, and so I wanted to ask your opinion, knowing basically what you would say.
So you don't have to ask, but if you are going to ask, then you just give a detailed description of what is the set of circumstances, what are your options, how you can materially support yourself, and what is your aspiration. Because then with that body of information, then I'll give you guidance. I know what you need to do, but I want you to know that I recognize the material circumstances of a person, and I can look to see how much is something of an obstacle and how much it isn't. And if someone links with me, what would otherwise be a terminal obstacle may not be if they can follow the instructions. So it's always a possibility, but it wouldn't be one that I would go at first, because ultimately it would require the faith in the teacher to take you across a chasm that you are right now not maybe able to take. But if you can cross that chasm in your own intelligence, in your own heart, then you're more empowered to be able to do that. So that's where you can write me an email and tell me.
What I decide?
What
I decide, you mean?
No, what are your circumstances? What are the factors? What is it?
I could move out of my house today.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
if you had an opportunity to leap into the next possibility of being, you have a way of supporting yourself. Okay. You'd be able to move.
Look how much I'm resisting
behind,
that. Yeah.
Send them, holiday notes. So then there is something I can tell you to do. You can start by participating in every single program that's available for you to participate in, including coming to Washoe for some period of time. And then I have a whole path for people who are really serious about going there. And I will just guide you on that process. Moth Queen.
That's a big leap.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm here for. Big leaps.
I know.
I can do little leaps just like that. Big leaps, I'm actually interested in. I have people around me who have made big leaps. Just talk to them. They're in this room. They have made big leaps or in the process of making big leaps. And the nature of the leaping is what is the unique opportunity of a realized teacher. So you're already, the insect domain recognizes who you are.
Well, the ants came in after the moths.
See, you're the queen of that domain.
Then a hornet came in.
You got it down, girl.
Okay, thank you. This is not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, you got to be careful what you ask for. Right?
I wanted the easy road. Thank you so much.
Carolyn.
So I just wanted to hear, I have two things. One is I'm beginning to break up the energy systems. Okay, I could feel it breaking, a lot of flotsam and jetsam going on.
Okay.
And I just want to hear again your guidance on how to break up some crusty old energy around the chakra systems, because once I've worked on the heart, then I could see the cascading effect.
Yeah.
That I have to really, concentrate on each of these centers. So I just wanted to ask you if you have guidance. I guess I needed to hear it again as to how to do this so that I don't go off track.
How can you go off track? You can't go off track. As a matter of fact, what you do is you let the fulsome go. You just notice the turbulence, you notice the energies, you notice the rising up of issues and stories and the energetic shifts, and you release them. So there's no trying to work with them,
Right.
or do anything with them, because now what they want to do is just move through you.
Okay, that's what I see. There's something in me that keeps wanting to twist this and say, you got to do something. Yeah, you got to. Yeah, you got to concentrate on this. You got to do this. So okay, all right. So I needed to hear that
Yeah.
again.
The Gita speaks of it. To be the ocean that receives all the rivers but remains unchanged.
It's a feminine reception. Yeah, thank you. The second thing is just a point earlier in your talk today, you mentioned that this is the dimension where we create all sorts of suffering, through this human dimension. But in the other dimensions, it's not all divine.
No. Well, but it's not all suffering either. The nature of the suffering in this dimension, this is the only dimension of karma, consequences. Yes, this is where hell is. This is where heaven is. There's no other dimension where this matters.
But there are evil asuras or
Yes, but they don't have the same consequence as it does for those of us who are embodied, because we're disadvantaged by our embodiment. If we knew who we are, they can't touch us. The more we're out of the body, the more we're in our own authority, and the more they're beyond interest in you, they'll work on easier prey. Usually the humans.
But they are existing.
Yes, there are areas of suffering, and there is the transition just when you're leaving the human body, where if you have unexperienced experiences that you've not met in your life, that you have to meet them during the transition. So the bardos, the Buddhists call it. So you have to go through a period of quite intense processing that you wouldn't be able to endure normally as a human being. You wouldn't be able to be conscious for it. So that in order those can be burned off, so that you can take residence in whatever you have been able to come to, or what you come to in the past, or whatever level you've been able to come to in this life without that burden. That gives you greater spaciousness, and then you reside the rest of the period of time in that domain until you're pulled back to earth, to the next level of the unfolding of the possibility. Being in a human body is the only way you evolve. You evolve in the human body, but you can work a lot of things out in the subtle world between lives that you couldn't, because life is so gripping and compelling when you're in a body. So the nature of this is that the unfolding See, I can't remember where that started from. So there was a question there that I was responding to, but I don't remember the question.
Right, about, I was thinking that there was evil beyond the human, but you were saying actually it's the human that creates this. The others may want to dance with the humans
With it,
and
or
have a little
align
fun.
with it, or they could be, for example, there's many, I mean, to talk about the domains, it's very complex, but you could just say that the beings that carry the darkness and the evil are the closest to Earth.
Yeah.
And those who are less close to Earth don't. They may carry some distortion. They may be sort of in enthrallment, because evil brings power for the individual ego. So power can exist as long as there is ego, separate identity. So it can exist in the subtle physical, it can exist in the subtle vital worlds, and to some extent in the subtle mental worlds, but in lesser extent. It can be thrilling to experience the power of the vital kingdom, thrilling or expanding the power for the ego of the kingdom of the mental planes. They are thrilling experiences, but they're not necessarily ego, because they can't embody. It's only when they're embodied that they can have consequences. What is evil? What is not evil? What is good and what is evil is actions that are aligned with the divine purpose is good, and actions that aren't. Actions that are inherently oriented to the unfolding of the evolutionary possibility of consciousness are good, and that which opposes, resists, or destroys that unfolding, or we would call evil. They're not evil. They're just two expressions of two principles that have to always exist concurrently in duality so that existence can exist. Without the duality of these two basic principles, there couldn't be existence. They're not real. When they come together, they disappear. As long as they're separate, they can stay in place and hold a tension between them that allows existence. So when I talk about the Sat and the Asat, the evil you would call evil is the Asat. But in fact, it's the Kundalini Shakti that wakes up out of the first chakra as well. It's the life force. It's the divine nature. It's the whole principle of existence from that side. And from the top side is the absolute, brilliant, unspeakable quality of the absolute, coming out of that which was prior to existence into existence intentionally, bringing its intelligence, bringing its principle of capacity for knowing and experiencing. So there you have it.
You can't have a drama without the whole.
Yeah, you need the comparison, right? We're here for the difference. This world is enchanting because of the difference, right? You love somebody, you hate somebody. When the love and hate are right next to each other, if nothing else, it's great sex, right? So it's just this whole domination and submission. It's this whole thing of right and wrong. And it's the drama of the human enchantment that keeps us trying to work something out that was never meant to be worked out from the level that it was created.
And Satya, just one quick thing. I'm mindful of the time, but when I first went on retreat with you, the very first retreat, I went unconscious. But prior to that, there was this feeling of such negativity, and that's what I went on. I never could figure out what that was.
You were going to the Asat.
Yeah. Okay. Now the piece came together.
Yeah. You were going to the Asat. Samadhi has two manifestations, one into absolute darkness and one into unspeakable light. They're both true. They seem to be polarities from one vantage point, but from the other, they're two sides of the same one truth.
Thank you. It's been 2 years I've been working on that.
Okay, well, glad to answer that unspoken question. So it's always interesting to what the room is willing to have revealed, because the nature of the fabric of the structure of existence has been all revealed to me. So there is everything, every question relative to what's possible I can share experientially, and my own in a languaging that can make it accessible to you. So it's like an oracle, right? When the oracle shows up, you can go in and ask it anything. And what it's going to tell you is something that's aligned with that opportunity in that moment for you, whatever that may be. And so that's what this moment together is a gift by which you may access something that would not be possible for you to access otherwise. I'm not doing that. I'm not claiming that like from my ego. I am simply speaking from the fact of what happens and my recognition of how that happened for me with my teacher. The only difference is my teacher never explained anything. He never let me, and that's why I'm probably so obsessed about explaining it all, because my teacher wouldn't explain anything, so I had to figure it out for myself. And the gift of it is I can be clear about the nature of how it all is for the Western mind. No one else is interested. Indians don't need the explanation. They just want love. They just want God. They don't want that body of knowledge. That's like the booby prize. All right. Any other questions in the room? Anybody else like to come forward? Okay. So I invite you all who can to come to Connecticut for the next 2 satsangs and the Salt Weekend. We have room. The Salt Weekend is a Friday, Saturday, and half a Sunday. And it is where part of Friday, all day Saturday and half of Sunday, where you just sit in that kind of essential quality of what I am and discover it for yourself. We pretty much do silent sittings on Saturday of 2 hours each for 3 sittings, and then evening interaction. If you've never meditated before, you will be able to meditate because I bring that energy wherever I go. So you will be able to survive. You will not unfortunately die, but you will be able to discover something that wasn't there that was possible. It's one of my little like appetizer for what my more developed programs are. So it's an aperitif, something to sample. But we do in the fall, in November, we have a 9-day retreat. And we're choosing to do it on the East Coast in North Carolina. So the 9-day retreat is really kind of like the full transmission. Not only is it energetic, not only is it silent sitting, not only do you have small groups, but you also have the body of knowledge being reviewed to you in a greater extent during those 9 days. So that'll be the last one of this year. And then we go to India, where we go for 2 months, but programs.
No.
We'll have 2 months of programs, right? 6 weeks for
I don't have, oh, there
Care of
we go.
Anomaly and
January, February, March.
January, February,
Yeah.
March.
So
And those are our immersion experience of which you will not recover.
Yeah. He was like, yes. Yeah, last year we went to Rishikesh for the very first time, and that was pretty amazing. That's 15
Amazing.
days for people who can't make the 6 weeks. So.
Yeah. So these programs are really set up to support you. Now we try to make them as affordable as possible. We try to make as many of my teachings available as freely or affordably as possible. We have a lot of free information on the website. We have live broadcasts like this one that are very affordable to sign up for. And we still have some free broadcasts that occur right on Tuesdays.
Tuesdays.
Yeah. So there you are. There's the invitation. What we're going to do for the rest of the evening is we're just going to sit silent. We have a little more time than usual, so we'll sit silent for 15 minutes. So what is silent and sitting? Wait a second. I want to see if there's anything you have left to say.
No, I'm fine. Is everybody who's wanted? Does anyone have any just logistical questions?
No.
No.
Oh,
Ah. Boone, North Carolina. It's on the website.
boom.
Science
boom.
of Art. What is who knows where it's at? Thank you.
Art of Living Center.
Yes. I have someone who does that now, so I don't remember things. It's terrible. Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so a silent sitting is just sitting. It may be meditation for you, or it may be just sitting. And the nature of just sitting is be aware of your body sitting in a chair. breathing. Be aware of your breath. And then instead of going into your head, go into your body to see what the feeling is or to what is the energy that's there in your body. Just be attending, be the space for what's arising in the field of you. And that's it. Okay. Let us begin. Om Namo Brahmane Satchidananda Murtaye. Om Namo Brahmane Satchidananda Murtaye. Om Namo Brahmane Satchidananda Murtaye. All glory to Buddha. Namaste.